everyone, this is update for July 15, 2024, day 873 of the war, end of the date update. Also catch up for July 14. I'm going to start with the general strategic updates, and then I'm going to switch to the situation battlefield. In terms of for those who wait just for the battlefield update, there is really not much going on, really very minor changes. But let's move back for two strategic updates. So I would call future US President Donald Trump picked his VP, J.D. Vance. He is a senator from Ohio. Having said this just generic stuff, let's just actually discuss who he is and what this really means for probably for Ukraine, and also what it just generally means in terms of the future US presidential administration and their policies. So first, J.D. Vance has very clear views that Ukraine should cede its territories to Russia, just basically close to unconditional surrender. And this is the same view that's supported by Vivek Ramaswamy, who is also close ally of J.D. Vance, and this is sort of inner circle of future US president. What this view is really missing or lacking is there is sort of desire to appease Russia at the expense of Ukraine and then focus on China, or basically inwardly focus. And that view is, in a way, it's kind of like thinking that the world rotates around me, and what I say, that's how it's gonna happen. There's really inability to understand that Russia, China, and other countries, including Iran and North Korea, and there's more of those countries, including even India, as I showed in the prior videos, they want to change world order. They are not happy with the status quo that was established as a result of World War II, and they want to change it in their favor at expense of others. And that's really the simple sort of explanation of what's going on. And so war in Ukraine is just part of that bigger plan, bigger action. And in this case, China and Russia have a common interest. This is the best, sort of most stronger uniter of in any undertaking. So just simply thinking that you can, separate Russia from China by, allowing Russia to occupy part of Ukraine or even the entire Ukraine is, I would say, completely misguided. It will backfire, and it really reminds the appeasement of Nazi Germany in 38, 39. It's just, as they say, history does not repeat, but it rhymes. So it's exactly the same situation where it doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes. And this eventually, it will become very clear that was a huge mistake. It probably will not happen immediately, because Russia really desperately needs break. Russia is clearly indicating that they open to peace. Belarus president came a couple days ago saying we need to start talking about peace and so on. So and he's, as I mentioned before, he is really actively talking head of Russian president. And so Russia needs break, and that break also means lifting of all sanctions against Russia. So what that really means, this lifting of, and which will happen, because there is mm, strong support in the West to start getting uh, Russian natural resources as a way to improve economic situation and living standards. And so there is no doubt if there is peace, part of it will be lifting pretty much most of the sanctions, with probably some exceptions, like only a small number, which essentially will mean nothing. Um, what this means is that Russia will continue I would say, rearming itself, preparing for the next move for complete capture of Ukraine in, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years. So and that conflict at that time, Ukraine is not going to be viable, and it will sort of crumble like house of cards in a matter of probably weeks at that point. There won't be any long resistance or anything like that. And again, this will not separate Russia from China, and China is not willing to obviously lose support of Russia, because China is really interested in Russia's natural resources, and that means not only crude oil, that also means food. China deficient in food, and it's a strategic weakness of China, not having its own supply of food. And so if China secures Russia's supply of food, that really means that they can wage pretty much any wars against the West, because they can produce pretty much anything inside. They have Russia's oil and Iranian oil, and they have food supplies from Russia. So that really makes extremely stable relationship, extremely stable bond, almost like a chemical sort of reaction, and so these two forces, that's why they naturally gravitate, because they naturally complementary. And thinking that allowing Russia to have Ukraine is somehow will break that bond is simply misguided. There's no thinking there. It's more of, I would describe it as a knee-jerk reaction to opposing party, Democratic Party, is saying, okay, we want to support, then we'll say, no, we're not going to support. So in some ways, because there is, I've never heard any logical explanation why not support Ukraine. Having said that, there's a very clear case that supporting current Ukrainian political regime is waste of money. That is also undeniable reality, that current Ukrainian president and his group of people are simply too corrupt, too unintelligent. They don't have mental capacity to deal with the problems that Ukraine accumulated over past 30 plus years since independence, and really those problems going back to the Soviet communist time, and even the times when Ukraine was under Russian Empire. So it is, accumulation of problems is tremendous and huge, and they're very deep, and they're not easy. And so it really requires deep understanding and intelligence, basically, which is what is really lacking. That's the root cause of all of the problems with Ukrainian president and his circle, is just simple lack of intelligence. And so, again, part of it is understandable. The position of J.D. Vance, and it's probably position of future U.S. president as well. So that's why I'm discussing this in depth, because this pick is sort of reflective of the internal position that's really sort of not declared yet by the future U.S. president. And I'm saying future unless there is something, again, some kind of assassination, or there's some kind of riot, or something else is happening, which is is possibility. It's not a high percentage, but it's not a sort of negligible situation as we've seen a couple of days ago. In terms of um, principles and views, actually, of J.D. Vance, there's actually no principle and views. He's kind of like tilting with the wind, which is extremely concerning sign even for the U.S. itself, and it also means that there is no clear vision, and especially economically. And I'm not going to focus on the social questions and stuff because they, in some ways, uh, relatively minor. Um, the biggest point is he is supporting unions. He's supporting increasing minimum wage. He's supporting tariffs. It's actually, I said this. This is actually, he could fit into Democratic Party perfectly because there's no the left and right divide is really artificial. There is no such divide. The real divide is uh, pro freedom and sort of more authoritarian pro regulation. And he's very clear in the same camp of authoritarian pro regulation, because all of these policies that I mentioned, they are of someone who wants to control and direct and so on. This is actually what created in the first place problems in the U.S. So in some ways, it's actually very um, it will be probably very huge disappointment to those who think that this is going to be more pro freedom administration or anything like that. It's probably going to be much um, pretty controlling administration. Is just the focus of the control is not going to be, let's say, pushing alternative energy, which by itself is already a great achievement. Not pushing that, but it's still going to be pretty negative. Not to mention that, for example, setting tariffs will simply lead to decline in the living standard in the U.S. And J.D. Vance and people like him simply denying that without, they cannot explain how it's not going to happen, but it is sort of nature of sort of gravity. If you increase tariffs, it's basic economics. The living standard are gonna go down. The same is it's basically what he's advocating in a simple ways for monopolization of the economy, which again reduces living standard because unions is basically monopolization of the economy. Tariffs are monopolization of the economy, and increasing minimum wage is also monopolization because it prevents low skilled people from being able to find jobs. So basically, it creates artificial unemployment. So all of these policies are pretty, in its own way, just pretty, I would say, ugly. I'm sure there are others in the future Trump administration who probably will advocate for keeping taxes where they are. I don't know if they're going to be able to reduce them. That's probably the only sort of positive, but at the same time, giving the deficits of the US governmental deficits, there has to be then cuts in terms of expenses, and that also fairly unpopular because it's all you need to really cut costs in the medical system in the US, and that will be extremely painful and nearly impossible. It's just the sort of the nature will force the hand eventually. So that's in a nutshell. I would say it's sort of my prediction, this new administration will be in many ways disappointment to people who really think it's going to be more freedom and so on. And it actually may lead to collapse in the living standard in the U.S. So now let's actually switch to the situation a little bit in Ukraine. And there was a new poll of Ukrainian population asking, their opinion about the future of the war and what Ukraine should do. So it's the way I would describe it is the following. So this is the questions about like if Ukraine should cede those territories that are captured by Russia. As you can see, 82 to 83%, 83 to 84% are against it. So it's very clear there is consensus in Ukrainian society that it doesn't want to cede any territories to Russia, including Crimea. Then if I move to this circle, this is a question here is it the right time to start peace negotiations with Russia? And actually, as you can see, majority, 44% say, 43.9 to be precise, saying yes, 35% saying no, and 21% don't know. But so I would summarize this, that Ukrainian society is willing to have negotiations, but not at the expense, not at the territorial expense. That's just something that's, I would say, is a non-starter for Ukrainian population, for Ukrainian citizens. I would say the best compromise, which I mentioned many times before, would be Ukraine being neutral, not in NATO, not in EU, sort of Swiss type of neutrality with full territorial integrity. And I think that would really ensure long-term stability, because it would be buffer for Russia, because they don't want NATO to be close to them. And, it actually will allow Ukraine to be viable country and state and so on. So say that would be the best solution. I don't think that this is in the cards at the moment, but we'll see. Then a related topic is about negotiations, peace negotiations. So most likely that peace negotiations are going to be happening in November after elections in the U.S. With the newly elected U.S. president. And as I mentioned before, we all know what's the position there. So that would be difficult situation for Ukraine, for Ukrainian society, where it will be pressured. Things are going to be much worse at that time in Ukraine from all perspectives. And so we'll see what happens at that moment. And as I stated before, that may spark 1917 moment in Ukraine. Now let's move to the walk through the front line. I'm going to do it in a clockwise fashion, the way I always do. So first, the situation along the state border remains more or less the same. Nothing really special happening there. Let's move to the situation northeast of Kharkiv. Again, front line essentially stabilized. Ukrainian forces gaining little ground in Vovchansk, little ground in Hleboke, but I would say largely resources at this point exhausted, and there's not enough resources to finish the squeeze of Russian troops to the Russian territory. Now let's move to the situation on the North Lugansk section of the front line. Things here more or less the same. Russian troops are slowly advancing westwards. So here I have an update where Russian troops managed to advance and start basically almost capturing this village Peshane. Otherwise, in the southern part of this front line, situation more stable, thanks mostly to Azov brigade, the 12th, number 12, because there's also number 3, which is part of Ukrainian military, and this one is uh, part of National Guard. Now let's move to the situation on the North Donbass section of the front line. Things here also more or less the same without major changes. Russian troops slowly advancing, but there is no major sort of villages that are being captured this time. Now situation west of Bakhmut around Chasiv Yar. Russian frontal squeeze continues. They're making small advances here and there, but nothing major yet. It doesn't mean that things are not, situation is clearly not stable here by any means. And basically what I mentioned before, it's a slowly losing Chasiv Yar. It's just not going to be as fast as, let's say, Russian propaganda was saying it's going to happen. It's just going to be much more drawn out process. Now let's move to the central Donbass section of the front line. Things here also more or less the same, no changes since last time. As you can see, Ukrainian forces are slowly retreating. Russian troops captured even more of this Novoselivka Persha, so it's just pretty quickly it's going to be lost. And Ukrainian forces will completely evacuate this eastern side of this Vovcha River, basically. And the bigger question is when Russian troops will breach through this kind of like narrow gate here, and then it will be much easier advance forward. So that's going to be, and then this whole situation is going to become much more difficult strategically for Ukrainian forces, which can create cascade of negative effects around it. Now this is just bigger picture. This is what I'm talking, that this whole salient that Russian military built, it's becoming more and more dangerous. And once they advance even more, this will create problems to, especially to the south of it. And in terms of Krasnohorivka, Ukrainian forces slowly but surely losing ground in Krasnohorivka, but still controlling some northwestern parts of this town. And Russian troops completely bogged down west of Marinka, but it's understandable because all of the resources are pushed in this area, we'll call it west of Ocheretine. Now let's look at the situation at Zaporizhya front line. Things here are more or less the same, no major sort of changes. Russian troops continuing their advance post Urozhayne, so just moving forward, well, I guess north, slowly but surely. Again, no major advances, but it's just slow frontal squeeze here. Not really much going on in the Robotina area. Now we'll finish with the situation along the Dnipro River, and things here are quiet. Mentioned many times before that both sides don't have resources to do much here, basically, and that's just the status quo. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. Until next time. Bye bye.